On the morning of August 23, 1995, a motorist summoned rescue workers and emergency personnel to a remote area off North Carolina's Blue Ridge Parkway. While pulled over at a scenic overlook, she had spotted a van that had plunged several hundred feet down the steep embankment. There was no movement in the vehicle. Transylvania County rescue workers made their way down the cliff, hopeful they would find survivors. When the rescue worker entered the vehicle, a piece of cinder block stained with blood fell out of the van. A woman laid slumped across the front seat. She had suffered massive head injuries. There was no pulse. The body was removed from the vehicle and sent to the morgue for examination. North Carolina State Police began looking for clues to tell them how and why the vehicle went off the road.
I didn't see no skid marks with no plan.
No skid marks or any signs of sudden braking were found. And there were no indications that the driver had swerved off the road. It was likely that the woman had fallen asleep at the wheel or had been under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The van was brought up the embankment for a more detailed evaluation. A check on the vehicle's tags revealed that the van was registered to a man named Edward Kratzert, whose address was several hundred miles away in Bradenton, Florida. After finding no obvious mechanical problems with the van, technicians processed the vehicle. Reddish-brown stains were found on the exterior of the driver's side door. They tested positive for human blood. Inside, they recovered a wallet and driver's license. The driver was identified as 45-year-old Wendy Kratzert, the wife of the vehicle's owner. Blood was found throughout the van. The back of an earring was located on the passenger seat floor. Unsure what to make of the findings, investigators collected several items into evidence. Transylvania County authorities began trying to track down the victim's family to inform them of Wendy's tragic death. At autopsy, medical examiner Dr. Robert Thompson looked to the victim for clues that could explain the crash. He found no traces of drugs or alcohol in the victim's blood or tissue. Wendy's death had resulted from blunt force injuries to the head. She had suffered 5 individual fractures to the top and back of her skull. Though Wendy had not been wearing a seatbelt, for Dr. Thompson, the location and number of injuries were not typical of car crash victims.
Usually injuries that we find with automobile accidents are those in the face areas where the face comes down and hits the dashboard. So the injuries that are found are not really consistent with an automobile accident, although conceivably it could have happened that way.
The autopsy results prompted investigators from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation to take a closer look at Wendy Kratzert's accident. Special agent and blood spatter expert Andy Klein reviewed photographs taken at the scene. He was immediately struck by the lack of blood found where the victim's body came to rest.
From the position that she came to rest in with her head in the passenger side floorboard, and with the wound being to the top and the back of her head, I would have expected to see a larger pool of blood in that floorboard had she received that wound in the van.
More troubling, however, was the presence of the victim's blood on the vehicle's exterior running board.
There was several blood spatters that I noted on the running board portion of the vehicle that would have been protected had the door been shut. So at some point the door was open and she bled on it.
All of the evidence suggested that Wendy Kratzert had been bleeding before she ever got into the van. The routine death investigation had raised more questions than answers. Police learned that Wendy and her husband owned a vacation home a few miles away from the scene of the accident. Later that night, authorities went to the address. No one appeared to be home. Then, they discovered a large pool of blood. Tests later confirmed it had come from Wendy Kratzert. An earring back, identical to the one found inside the van, was located a few inches away. Technicians concluded that no one could have survived such blood loss without immediate medical attention. Nearby, investigators found the outline of an object. Its shape was similar to the blood-stained cinder block found inside the van. For police, there could be no doubt that Wendy Kratzert had been brutally murdered. Her death had been staged to appear as an accident.